Welcome to Wealthing Talks. I am your host, Alicia Castillo-Holly, bringing you real-life conversations from Silicon Valley or somewhere around the world. We will talk about disruptors, angel investments, venture capital, and of course, family offices. Join me along with my children, their families, friends, disruptors, and investors as we explore the fascinating world of creating wealth in a completely different and authentic way. Hello, everyone. It's such a pleasure to have Raphael here with us. Raphael, thank you so much for spending your time with us today.
It's my pleasure.
So tell us, what are you doing now and how did you get to do this?
I think the easiest way to describe it is I make investments in space. And just to clarify what that is, because sometimes I go to cocktail parties and I say I invest in space, and people are like, "Oh, you are in commercial real estate." And I'm like, "No, I'm not in commercial real estate. I invest in things like rockets and satellites and other exciting things going on in and around space, like outer space." And I do that through a VC fund called E2MC, which is based in Arlington, Virginia, so basically Washington, D.C. And they were making investments very early stage, typically first check at seed or pre-seed stage in space startups. We even helped to co-found two space startup accelerators. We co-founded something called KickSky, which was the first space startup accelerator in India, and then Orbital Edge, which is a space startup accelerator in the US in partnership with ISS National Lab, which is a NASA affiliate running the American portion of the space station, of the International Space Station. And then besides that, since late January, I IPO'd a Nasdaq listed space and defense focused SPAC, special purpose acquisition company. And that, of course, is looking much later stage at very mature companies in the same sector. But yeah, basically investing in and around space.
And how did you get to do that?
Yeah, that's a long story. So
No,
my
tell us a long story. Don't make it short and make it fun. This is the best part.
Yeah. So my original background, so I went to the Wharton School undergraduate. And so as one does when you come out of the Wharton School, especially when I came out of it, which is at the very end of the 90s, you have a very high chance of ending up in investment banking, which is what I did. So I did mergers and acquisitions at JP Morgan and then at Greenhill, then had a chance to switch from, well, what we call the sell side to the buy side. So actually making investments. And I quickly realized that that was, well, I found it more interesting. And so I became a proper proprietary trader in equities at Deutsche Bank. And then eventually that group spun out into an independent hedge fund doing so-called long-short investing in the public markets in equities. And then about 10 years ago, I had quit that position and was sort of trying to figure out what to do next. And I got the chance to advise some large shareholders of SpaceX about, informally advise them about where SpaceX could go financially, like in the medium to long term.
How many
And
years ago was that?
that's almost 10 years ago at this
Oh my
point.
gosh.
Yeah, exactly. It seems like, yeah, like it was yesterday.
Like another era, yeah.
Yeah. So it was funny because at first I almost turned down that project because I felt like I didn't know enough,
Mhm.
really, that my knowledge wasn't deep enough about space. Because I mean, the space sector was extremely niche. I mean, it's niche now. It was, you imagine, 10 years ago, right?
Yeah.
But you know, those guys very much motivated me to take on the project. Anyways, saying just learn about it and just ask us questions and read about it. And I love lifelong learning. It's probably
Lie to us.
it's probably what I love most. And so I did take a look at SpaceX just based on public information. I got completely fascinated with the company. I sort of almost immediately decided to invest myself via one of their SPVs. And by the way, sort of fun fact, so many listeners, and I'm sure you know that now it's a frenzy, right? Now you have these like 3 to 4 layer SPV,
Layers, right?
SPV investing into an SPV, investing in SPV, maybe investing into a cap table, but maybe you don't even know. Like, if you hope it's investing in a cap table somewhere, and we'll find out soon when the IPO happens, right? Um, So 10 years ago, trying to convince people to invest in SpaceX, I mean, most people were like, what is this? Like a space company? Are you joking? And this is before Starlink, right? Literally,
Yeah, yeah,
when I
yeah.
had invested and when I was talking to other people about investing, SpaceX had not launched even the first demo satellites for Starlink. It was just a plan, right? And it sounded a little bit crazy. It's like, what, you're going to take on like
Yeah.
all of satellite communications and maybe even the global telecom industry? Well, here we are 10 years later. So anyway, and so back then, 10 years ago, I looked at that and I was like, wow, this is much more interesting than anything else I'm doing. And I was, well, life is short. Like, maybe I should be doing this because this seems like something where I can wake up every day and it's actually exciting, which is wasn't true for certain other things I'd been looking at the time. So I took the decision to really pivot, I guess, my whole life towards the space side. And that involved for the next 3 or 4 years. Honestly, I was just learning about it. I was just reading books, taking some courses, going to
Wow.
conferences, networking, because it's a deep tech sector and I have a lot of respect for it, right? I think it's a deep tech sector which you can still join, and I hope many people still will, and maybe even some of the listeners now, because it's recent enough that you can still get up the learning curve. Sort of like, I give you the counterexample. I also love biotech, but I think it's much more difficult for me, I rightly or wrongly feel, to make a difference there because it's an established sector for like almost 50 years now.
Yeah.
And
More than
so I
that.
think there's just
I was
much
doing
more
biotech.
established
No,
knowledge
no,
for space.
biotech. No, don't take that away from me. Biotech is more like 30 years because I was doing biotech. Um, Actually, I was doing biotech 42 years ago. So
There you go.
it's an old industry. Well, and space too.
Well, space is That's an interesting point. Space, of course, is old if you go back to sort of when did space exploration start, right? And so technically, it's the first human-made object to go to space, a German V2 rocket, right, in the mid 1940s, and then of course we had Sputnik in the late 50s, and then we had the moon landing, and sort of while Apollo was going on, we started even the commercial exploration of space, right, with satellite communications and remote sensing spy satellites, amongst other things, of course. So it's an old sector, but this like latest iteration of the space sector, what we're seeing now, what sometimes people describe
Yeah.
as new space, that's
Hmm.
arguably less than 15 years old. So it's
Okay.
reasonably recent.
Yeah. So I have a funny story for that. One of my friends did the spaceship to go to Venus,
Mm.
and he was in his 20s. He's a very good friend of mine. He was in his 20s. So in order to stand the heat, they had to buy one of the things that they had to buy was a big diamond. And the diamond was not from the US. So the US government imposed a tax on the import of diamonds. But when you export things back outside of the US, you get the tax back.
So it went to
And
space. Yeah.
and the government decided that there was not enough proof that they had exported it outside of the US.
Hmm.
So but it was a big amount of money. It was more than $100,000. And my friend is now, this was around 50 years ago. And
Right.
he was a young engineer. And of course, in the budget, they assumed that they were going to get that money back. And they
Hmm.
didn't get that money. Well, actually, they didn't assume that they had to pay the taxes. And so that was a big chunk of the budget. And it took them around 15 years to prove that the spaceship had disintegrated in space because it was so hot that there was absolutely zero possibility that they could sell the diamond outside of the US.
Yes. 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 That's funny. I mean, there should have been precedent, right? Because you can find this online. But I think the Apollo astronauts, when they came back from the moon, they had to fill out customs declarations.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they did. And then I thought about this again when, when we had, when was that last year when there was all the tariff announcements in the US. Some of us were jokingly saying, oh, well, what if we start doing more stuff in space?
Yeah.
What kind of tariff is gonna apply here?
Is that going to be like a ship that, a ship carries the flag? But I mean, well, that's why space has become the next frontier. That's so exciting about that.
Exactly.
So you
Exactly.
have a fund now. Do you do SPVs as well?
Yeah, we sometimes do SPVs because I mean, especially now the fund is at its stage where we're seeing we're going to increasingly see follow-on rounds.
Uh-huh.
And of course, in many cases, we have pro rata rights. In many cases, the founders like us a lot because we are sector specialists, so they really appreciate us. So they give us even extra capacity. So we will increasingly utilize that.
And you're raising the second fund too.
That's correct. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about the funds and how do you make money of that? Actually, how do you create wealth? And now that we're in that topic, what is your definition of wealth and how are you contributing to the creation of wealth?
How much time do we have? Okay. So
Well,
definition.
and I have two more very, very juicy questions. So,
Yeah. I mean, the definition of wealth. So, I mean, I'm trying to get my mind into the right frame here because we've been now talking, of course, about my VC fund and everything, but that's probably not how so that would go very much into a monetary direction, but that's probably not how I would personally for myself define wealth. So, trying to find the right way to phrase that. I think for me, wealth coming back to that career change I made, right? When I said
uh-huh.
I pivoted to space because it made so much sense to me and life is too short and I want to wake up every morning, almost every morning, do something
Yeah.
meaningful. I think that for me is wealth. For me, the one good definition of wealth is the ability to lead a quote unquote meaningful life.
Mhm.
Okay. And I think so kind of the stereotypical stuff, like what's going to be in your tombstone, or you're on your deathbed, like, are you going to be in
Oh,
your deathbed?
don't answer that because we're gonna ask that.
Yeah. Okay. But sort of
So
like,
how is this fun contributing to the wealth creation, not only for you, but for others? Where's the
yes.
juice?
So this is a good question. So for me, I think I kind of already laid that out, right? But by the way, so the fund, let's be very clear, we still want to make very good returns on the fund, right? And even when I say sort of my definition of wealth, let's stick with that, is being able to lead a meaningful life, right? You can almost reframe everything else that people typically think about and make that sort of a means to achieving that end, right? So money
Mhm.
is a good example. Like money gives you the resources and sometimes it just gives you simply the time, right? That you have enough money that it frees up your time, that you can spend it on things that enable you to achieve that mission of leading a meaningful life, right? And then certain people need a certain amount, other people need like a different amount, right? But so money is a means to an end, right? By the way, health is another means to an end, right? You can't lead a meaningful life if you're dead or like almost dying or something, right?
Well, you
And
can have a meaningful death, but
yeah,
not life.
yeah, and even like away from monetary side, like I don't know, like having like a loving family. I kind of also, I mean, that's kind of I think a worthwhile goal in itself, but it also I think gives you a foundation from which you can build your own meaningful life, if that makes
Yeah.
sense, right? So, but coming back to like the fund, right? So yes, we want to make like attractive financial returns, and that hopefully enables other people to kind of utilize those financial resources in whatever they consider is meaningful, right? And I don't mean to prescribe to anyone what that is. People have to decide that for themselves, right? But sometimes it's actually not only money. So it's been really interesting for me to see that space is something that really fascinates people, right? Or many people are fascinated by space. It's almost visceral, right? It's like the stereotype of like so many little kids wanted to be an astronaut, right? It's
Yeah.
something about exploration, about the unknown, the final frontier. How many people love Star Trek, right? And watched it as like, growing up, that type of thing. And so we see that come through even at the fund in other ways beyond the financial returns. So this may sound like almost made up, but I swear it's true. Like we've had multiple LPs and our limited partners, and our investors are basically all family offices, at least in the last fund. It's probably going to be slightly more institutional going forward, but the past was all family offices. And then typically we've been very lucky that we've been speaking in almost every case to the so-called beneficial owners, so the people who actually the families actually own the money rather than some employee.
Mhm.
And I think it's fair to say that almost all of these families, yeah, they want to make financial returns, but actually excited about space.
Yeah.
They think that space has something to contribute to humanity, whether that's science or sort of like manufacturing things in space, like new types of drugs which can have positive impact, or making new discoveries, or going to the moon and doing stuff there. And what was I going to say? Oh, yeah, the thing that almost sounds made up, but it's true. Like I've had, I think, so far three examples of LPs where they have school-age kids, and they asked me to talk to their kids to like
Oh,
try to help inspire them about space and maybe do something around like science and I totally love that because that really goes beyond the monetary thing, and that kind of goes then back to to my original starting point
yeah.
of doing meaningful stuff. And it was like when I'm like on a call like that with a teenage kid, and we're just like, you can see they're so excited about space and wow, and like when are we going to go to Mars and how are we going to survive there, and all of the questions, the curiosity. It's just awesome.
It's very exciting. I read somewhere when my kids were young. My kids are in their 40s. So when my kids were young, I read somewhere that the two most common interests in toddlers are space and dinosaurs. So one has to do with who we are in the universe, and the other one, where do we come from? And I do remember, and sometimes I do that on purpose because I like space with my grandkids. We lay down on the grass or on the sand and we look at the sky and we start just talking about the sky because it's fascinating. And as adults, somehow we miss that. We look at, the computers, I don't know, the TV, the books and the garden, but we stop looking upwards. And I think that's fascinating. So
Yeah,
I really enjoy that connection there. I think it's fascinating, and I like space, so I invest in space too.
I agree, and I think it's also connected to some of the arguably biggest questions that exist, sort of like
Hmm.
why is the
Yeah.
universe there? Where does it come from? Where is it going? And the other
Mhm.
one, which I totally love, which is there other life out there, and what type of life?
Oh, you should totally follow the SETI Institute. Do you know them?
Oh, of course, yes.
I, yeah, they just Carl just published a book on that, but that is why we used to look at that. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, I grew up in Venezuela in the mountains. I remember thinking that the mountains were the tooth, and we were in the mouth of a huge, gigantic animal, and every time it rained, it was because they were drinking water. And then I share that with my with my elementary school friends, and they're like, "What about when you eat?" It goes behind the mountain. It goes somewhere else. Your kids don't care. But I do think that there's some romanticism in space that is beyond the
Mm,
financial returns, and I think and I think personally that's the essence of wealth. So let's take this back to a personal level because
yeah.
you've taken us through certain trajectories. So if you were to write yourself, your younger self, a letter saying, "Hi, Raphael, I'm I'm yourself 20 years later. I want you to know this. What would you write to your younger self that you've learned that you didn't know when you were younger?"
Oh gosh. Um, and is that do you mean broadly life lessons or investing? Because I can do both.
I think we would do, well, you can do both. I mean, I asked the question, you pick the answer.
Oh yeah, let me start with okay, I'm gonna cheat. I'm gonna start with the investing one because that's sort of like an answer I've given to many people and it's easier in my mind. The other one is sort of big question. I have to kind of try to parallel process that in the back of my head. On the investing side, it's been very interesting because as I mentioned, I used to be a public markets investor, right? And like basically investing in stocks in a hedge fund. And now I'm a VC, an early stage VC investor. And I had not appreciated probably the first few years how that is very different well, it's different in many ways, but one way which I sometimes point out is in the public markets, it's basically all about risk management, arguably, and avoiding stuff that can blow up in your face. So like you don't want to invest in some stock that then drops 30-50% on you. It can just destroy your portfolio. Whereas on the upside, some people on Wall Street say the upside takes care of itself as long as you avoid the disasters. So risk management, or the way I sometimes phrase it, in the public markets, you want to avoid, statistically speaking, like false positives, like stuff
Mhm.
that you end up investing in, but you shouldn't have invested in. It actually shouldn't have made the
Okay.
cut. And then in VC, it's the total early stage VC anyway, it's the total inverse. It's like it's completely expected that many, maybe most of your stuff as a very early stage VC is going to go to zero or close to zero. And it's
Hmm.
all about the false negatives. It's about what did I miss that I did not invest in? And like it became like a, $10 billion company.
Yeah, yeah.
So anyway, so that's a very easy one on the
So how do
investing
you
side.
navigate that now?
Well, now I kind of try to really, I have tried to train my mind to, if you will, switch mental models, right? So had this very ingrained mental model of risk management, sort of like, what could go wrong? Where are the additional risks I'm not seeing, right?
Mhm.
And I've trained myself to sort of early stage investing, sort of like, well, what could go right? Like if this works out perfectly, like perfectly, like what could the world be like? How big could this company be, right? And I think that's really not easy because the stuff that's really successful, it tends to blow our minds, right? I think
Mhm.
the people who, I forget now who, but people who invested really early in Airbnb, right? They sometimes say like, yeah, they thought it'll be some niche application for hosting people, and it's basically become like the biggest hotel company in the world, right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, you have to be really
I invested in
creative.
Airbnb pre-IPO. But I use
Congratulations,
Airbnb as
Adam.
well. No, but I use Airbnb as well because when I moved to Silicon Valley from Australia, I was in Eastern Europe for 6 months, and I
Yeah.
wanted to get to know the people. And so I rented rooms, I rented homes, and then when I moved to Silicon Valley, I didn't know where I wanted to live, so I spent a whole year living on Airbnbs, learning about the area. So it's a fantastic but before Airbnb there was something called couch surfing. That
Yeah,
was a
yeah, yeah,
nonprofit.
yeah, 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 yeah,
I didn't do couch surfing.
yeah,
I want a bed.
yeah. So I mean, that's to some extent what we're trying to do in the fund, right? Is I sometimes say like because I sometimes me and some other people as well we compare where space is right now to where the internet was, sort of at the
Yeah.
beginning of commercial internet, and there's so much opportunity. There's going to be some really significant companies, many of which probably haven't been founded yet, and like I just hope I'm trying to hang around the hoop, as we say in the US, and I just hope to catch some of these companies early on. Um, but so you were asking me about
Now,
life lessons.
personally, what have you learned? Or give me one or two tips for the people that are listening.
Yeah, so I mean, there's probably so many things to say. So beyond the specialized investing stuff, I think I'm a much more relaxed person now. So when I was in investment banking, even at hedge funds, I was in this, what we sometimes say the rat race, and you really sweat a lot of small stuff day to day. And now I think I'm at a stage in my life and have seen enough where the baseline assumption is like things are going to be okay. It's just going to work out. Like
Yeah.
I can endure. I will endure. Stuff is, I forgot, there's like a famous prayer, I forgot the name of it, where they say like, Lord, give me the strength to know the things that I can change, and then I'll change them. Give me the strength to know the things that I can change, and give me the knowledge to know which one is which, right? And I think that's very simple, but very true. I mean, I guess another thing that's closely related to that is so of course some things aren't under your control and like bad things will happen to you. And so yeah, so maybe the things aren't under your control. Those bad things can happen to you. What is 100% under your control is how you react to that.
Yeah.
And so I think that's also something which when I was younger, I don't know, I was just much more stressed out, I think.
Yeah, yeah. No, I can relate to that. When I moved here, the first time, so I've lived in the US 5 times. When I moved here the second time, I had two little kids and everything collapsed and nothing was working. And I used to talk to myself in the mirror with that particular prayer. I said, and then I said, now, I don't get stressed about anything. And people are like, well, why are you stressed? And I was like, because if I can't control the outcome, why would I stress?
Yeah.
Completely outside of my control, and the only thing that I can do is get stressed and get sick. So
Yeah.
it's
And,
yeah.
and I mean, I guess so now as we're talking about this, I kind of remember more stuff. There are probably some sort of lessons. Like, I think another reason people do get stressed out now, even more than maybe 10, 20 years ago, is just there's so much noise
Mm.
everywhere. And it's just, yeah, so one another lesson for me was just like trying to cut out the noise, right? And it's like the typical stuff is like the doom scrolling, the news, like there's just a lot of stuff which at the end of the day, I think doesn't add much, but which stresses people out.
So how do you do that? How do you cut that noise?
Well, I try to sort of police myself, right? So, there might be times when I'm going to bed. I kind of want to go to bed and like sleep, but I know I'm not going to fall asleep for another half hour. And then yeah, there's a temptation like, oh, let's scroll half an hour on X. And I was like, no, I'm gonna pull up Kindle and read a book.
Yeah.
And I think that's just probably the better choice.
Yeah, that's a very good advice for the people that are listening. Yeah. So now on that note, I don't know if you know that when I was a teenager, I fell off a horse and I was dead for a few days, and then I came back.
Wow,
And
I didn't know that.
yeah, it's okay. It's a good story. It's a great story. I have another one that is very good about a monkey that bit me. So I have some good stories. But the thing is that when you're so young and you realize that you are going to die, something changes in you. And I started thinking, what do I leave behind? Who am I when I'm no longer here? And I used the podcast to reflect upon that also because there's many people that are going to be listening to the podcast when we publish it years later. We have absolutely zero control over who could listen and who could not listen unless we turn it off. But there's an opportunity for you to have a huge impact on people. And we can be intentional about it. So
Hmm.
have you thought about who is Raphael when you're no longer here in time or when you're no longer here in space? Now that we're talking about space, what is your essence?
Yeah, I honestly, I think I'm probably still trying to define that. That's the perfectly honest answer. I let me try to answer that in two ways here. I mean, one is okay, I know you're asking about sort of like long-term legacy beyond death and everything, and I will get to that in 1 minute. I do, however, also really want to say that um, that is a legitimate focus, and I think that's a very educational question. People shouldn't optimize just on that. I think there is another thing which probably goes back to the previous question about like things that I've learned is that it's not only sort of what happens in the medium long term after death, what is my career like in typical interview question, what's my career like in 5 years? How much money will I have in 5 years? What I do. I've also learned that it's increasingly about the current moment and like what is happening right now. If some people are with you, like who is in front of me right now? What is my interaction with that person? Can I help that person somehow? Can I make that person laugh? Can I make that person happy? Like if there's no person around, if you're in nature, then maybe there's something to appreciate about the nature. So sorry, I know that's not directly answering your question. I just wanted to make that caveat that I do think the current moment matters a lot, and
Mm-hmm.
not only the long-term legacy. Now, for the long-term legacy, I think I've increasingly become very optimistic in the sense that everyone can leave a legacy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So again, I think our mind, in many ways, is often trained, and again, by all of that noise that's out there, that oh, it's like some sort of material legacy, right? It's like you're leaving a lot of money to your kids. Yeah, okay, that's nice, but at the end of the day, probably most material things are impermanent. Just full stop. I mean, yeah, okay, the people who built the pyramids, okay, pretty good run. Like, yeah, but I mean, that's probably like an example. But I think most like material things are going to be impermanent. But there's other stuff you can leave behind, and so it could be like I really enjoy writing and I enjoy writing books. I think like leaving a book behind is great because that can like well, if you're very lucky, that could last for a very long time, right? I mean, I'm not in this category, but there is, of course, books which are hundreds and thousands of years
Yeah.
around, right? I mean, some of the stuff we just discussed about being, chilled out and relaxed, and it's very much related to Stoicism, right? Like people have been reading Marcus Aurelius for like 2,000
Yes.
years, right? Like that man is gone 2,000 years. He's still influencing people today. That is like true legacy. So I think leaving information and impact behind like this is very, very powerful and something that I aspire to. And that can be a book. It can be I love teaching as well, and I teach at a few universities on typically on space entrepreneurship. Get some online courses on that as well, and there have now been multiple examples of space founders who started companies, and some of these companies are doing very well, like past Series A, where they basically told me like, well, I started this company because I took your course. And it
Oh,
makes me
wow.
very happy.
Yeah. Wow. Where do they find your courses?
So, I mean, there's some people who actually took courses in person with me. So sometimes I teach in-person university courses like at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology,
In
and some other
Zurich?
places. No, the one in Lausanne, the other one.
Ah, the one in, oh, I like Lausanne. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And then there's also a couple of online courses where also some people have taken those and started companies. And then sometimes I teach at International Space University, which
Mm-hmm.
sounds made up, but it exists. There, and there's also been at least one example of some founder who basically took a course and then started a company. We actually invested in that company in the end.
Oh, that's a full circle.
Yes,
So you
exactly.
you you started the flame, and then you fed the flame, and then you continue. It continues to expand. Raphael, how do people contact you? What is the best way to contact you?
Yeah, so people can easily find me on LinkedIn. Um, I just ask that people have a little bit of patience because I do get a lot of messages. So I sometimes, it'll take me a few days to kind of sift through and see and see the message. But that's a very easy way. Then people can also contact me if it's on the venture side through E2MC, the fund, which is e2mc.space.
And the second fund is going to be in that same web.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, yes, yes.
Okay. Do you think you're going to have a suite of funds?
I think that's the idea. So I think that space is going to be an interesting sector for really the foreseeable future because I think it's going through various iterations always,
Yeah.
cycles. Like now it started kind of naturally being very hardware heavy, like rockets and satellites and constellations. I think now we're moving towards applications, like what do we do with, those satellites in space, with stuff like data analysis or another application which sounds more futuristic is manufacturing things like drugs in space.
Correct. Yeah.
Eventually, we're going to
I
get to
see a
like the
lot.
really crazy sounding stuff, like in space resources, like mining asteroids. So this is going to keep going, I think, for a very long time, and we want to be there through all of those
Yeah.
cycles.
Yeah. Well, Raphael, thank you so much for spending your time with us and for talking about space. I'm going to be thinking about that tonight, looking at the sky. I also go to Australia a lot, and you can see the Milky Way in a better way there than here. So this has been a lot of fun. I really enjoy that. Thank you so much for spending your time with us.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for spending this time with us. I met Raphael at Davos at a conference about investing in a fractured world. Even though the world, the Earth is very fractured, space is not. And we just spent some time talking about the new frontier, the things that we can do in space in terms of physics, semiconductors, materials, life sciences, the new discoveries for how the brain works, how vitality works, how the cells evolve, maturity, drug discovery, tumor. So space is the next frontier, and I hope you've enjoyed this conversation as much as I have. This is your host, Alicia Castillo-Holly, and I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you for being with us. Thanks for tuning in to our Wealthing Talks. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation. To stay connected, visit us at wealthing.com. This is Alicia Castillo-Holly, your host, and until next time, yours in Wealthing.